Big Geek and I'm Dan, and this is a smart light. I can control it from my home assistant. These bulbs are pretty much the easiest way to get started with automation like this. You just screw them into an existing light fitting and away you go. However, they do have kind of a pretty major downside, and that is that the switch needs to be on all the time. So in UK wiring, the way this works is that the bulb needs to be powered all the time, and then you're using the smart device to tell it to switch on and off, but your existing wall switches control whether the bulb gets any power. So somebody can just accidentally or intentionally switch the light switch off, the bulb doesn't get any power anymore, and now your smart device is not even switched on. So this is kind of a problem, and that is where one of these comes in. This is a zbmini, a Sonoff zbmini. This is a Zigbee device, and they mostly sell these, like, weirdly, I guess, perhaps for an American wiring setup, to in theory go behind your light switch socket, because in American wiring I guess they have a load of room behind their sockets that we definitely don't have in the UK, and in American wiring I guess that's where the constant live is, but in UK wiring the constant live is up here in the ceiling rows, and your light switch is really just a loop with a break in it that the switch can either connect or disconnect. So what we really need to do is put the zbmini in here, and that's what we're going to do today. It's really easy. You need a slightly bigger ceiling rose, but fortunately I have a 3D printer. Obviously we're going to need to go turn off the power, but let's go do that now, and then let's get this rewired. Most important part of this obviously is to locate the ring that your light is on and make sure it is switched off. In my case this is lights, first floor, off it goes. And it's important to be really sure that you know which ring main the light is attached to, and that you've double checked that you really have got the power. Not every home is as sanely wired as you might imagine. Not every thing or mains outlet is necessarily connected to the ring main that you thought it was. Ask me how I know. However, we're good here. So we are going to drop all of the bits on the floor. Let's just take out this bulb and put it somewhere. So ceiling rose unscrews the cover, console to reveal wiring. Now, what are we going to need to do this job? One thing I recommend is a head torch, because you've just turned off your lights, and even if it is daytime, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to see very well, and a head torch means your hands are free, but you get to throw some light on the situation. So let's just go through the equipment list. Head torch, replacement ceiling rose. This one is 3D printed. The cover is not terribly exciting, but the important thing is that this is a little bit bigger than this one up here, and it has room specifically for my zbmini to hang inside, and enough room for the wires to come through, etc, etc. So we're going to take these wires out, undo this, switch it for this guy. I also have a screwdriver, some wire strippers, a chunk of wire that I'm going to use to make my life a little bit easier, and electrical jelly block. I think these things are called jelly blocks, because there's a bunch of wires, they're really quite stiff, and the zbmini control block doesn't have much room in them. It's not really designed to have pairs of wires in each terminal, so it's going to be easier where these have some pairs that are all connected in the same place to do that in this, and then I can run a single wire to the zbmini. The other thing I have is a multimeter with which I am going to try and verify which wires are which. So pretty obviously we have the light itself. Let me just zoom you in. So at each end you have the light pendant coming off. The wires are colour coded for live and neutral. Basically you have a block of 3 that are all connected together, a block of 3 that are all connected together, and a block of 2 that are connected together in these ceiling roses. So this set of reds are all the constant lives. This set of blacks are essentially constant neutrals, And then this jump here is a switched live, so it would make sense that this cable is the one that is coming back from the light switch. We need the light switches because this is a hallway light. It's actually connected to 3 different switches that all drive it. So what are these extra wires? So I think in this case, often that it's the case that you have one constant live that kind of comes in and all of your lights are daisy chained together. So basically the power comes in and out to the next one, in and out to the next one, around the floor. So 2 of these are essentially just the loop itself, and there's an extra pair in here which are the smoke detector, which I think is just off behind you. I'm not sure you can see it, but this is just spurred off of this light as well. I'm just going to take this off first, get it out of the way. And whilst I think of it, I'm going to take the old cover off, just miss it, and I'm going to put the new cover on, because if I don't do this immediately, you can pretty much guarantee that I'll forget to put the right one back on. Okay, so that's all ready to go when we get back that far. So, the suggestion is that this is the switched live, and I'm just going to take these out and then verify that with my multimeter. So it's pretty obvious from the connections, but just so that we are double checking our math, we've got our multimeter set on resistance reading. What you can see at the moment is that infinite resistance, which is sort of what we expect because I switched the light off. But if I use the switch to flip the direction, we should now have no resistance. There we go. So that is our switched pair. And that's the only important differentiator really in this whole setup. So we need to not lose which set are the switched set compared to all the others that are gang together. There we go. Take my go lock, make sure that the channels are fairly open, and I'm gonna see if I can persuade all of these things into the appropriate collections. Let's see if we get all of these together. We'll probably have a high degree of failed wiring in light fittings, because it's very easy to think that you've caught something into a terminal or a block like this and fail to do so. Tighten that down and then let's give it a tug and check if we've got them all. Right, so that looks alright, but wiring, like welding, is only good if you can give it a rag around and it's still holding, because you can easily convince yourself you've got things tight or you've welded properly and you haven't, and you do not want to run into that problem. Okay, so now we've got our earths all tied together where we need them, and that all tied together. Now I have a feeling, yeah, of course, this zbmini really needs to go this way up, but the switched is the grey side, which of course is the opposite side of all of this to the previous wiring, which makes life a little bit difficult. Right, okay, so I think I probably am going to be able to get those in. However, now is a good time to do the wiring on this. We don't need to do a lot of this wiring we can get away with doing on the ground without our hands above our heads. So let's come down and do that. So, we have our zbmini, we have our light fitting, we have our length. So this is the bit that's going to get us between the constant lives and the live input on the zbmini. So we just strip some wire off for this, give ourselves a decent amount of slack. Okay, so on these things what we have is neutral input, live input, neutral output, live output. So that basically means that the light socket will be between these two and the inputs will be between these two. So, right, so that's our supply line. Once you get to the point that you are trying to hold up the weight of a fitting, even if it's just this thing dangling, whilst also trying to wire it into blocks, oh boy, that is aggravating. These are fine, but the really fancy, interesting, pretty looking light fittings are a huge pain. A huge pain because you have to support that weight somehow, like right within the right threshold of close enough that you can connect the wires, but not so close that you can't see anything. So the other thing we're going to do is put some strain relief in. So I do have some strain relief sections on the base, just like the regular base, but I'm also going to put a zip tie around this to hold it, so that lampshade. But what you really want is that that weight is not pulling on where your wires connect, and is actually just resting on that. With that all wired up, we can go connect this into our constant supply, work the switch wires into the switch end, and we should be good to go. Okay, so let's put this guy into these blocks first. This is where we get into really tight quarters. These last switches are going to be a pig to get into place, I can just tell. I can just tell. This is where you get into the most things are connected. You're trying to tuck it all into a little tiny space. We're not. Now I will say it doesn't matter which way around you get. Doesn't matter which way around the switched bit goes into these terminals. These aren't actually carrying any current anymore anyway. They're just literally being checked for that resistance one, infinite resistance or zero resistance setup. Right. So I think we've got the black there maybe. One of the things I'm afraid of with these sprung loaded terminal blocks is that you get a wire that actually, you stick it in and it goes above the line, like above the little pocket that it's supposed to go into and not into it. Right, now the question is that connected? I think we are. I think we are good. So in theory, this, let's check this sleeve shut. Okay, so we'll get ourselves a bulb to put in and we'll put the power back on and then we'll see. So, now I just need to discover that Zigbee device in Home Assistant. Oh, you see that behind there. So we can now come into Home Assistant and go to our integrations. This is a Zigbee device, and in theory it went straight into pairing mode on its first launch anyway. So hopefully we will discover. There we go. We have a light. Right. So I've added that to the landing, and now we can switch it on and off from Home Assistant, but we can also switch it on and off from the light switches. What's interesting, what's good is that this switch actuates the light, but so does this switch. So now all the switches work normally, but also the home automation can do its thing, and it is way better than just the smart bulbs. Those zbmini things are cool. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you're not comfortable with electronics, don't go near this. If you're not comfortable working around what could be deadly voltages, don't. You obviously need to be comfortable and understand what you're doing, what your main switchboard is, how to disconnect power, how to be sure you've disconnected the power, how to make sure you've got all those connections right. All that stuff is important, but if you are comfortable, hopefully this was helpful to you as a thing that you can do to make your smart home a little bit smarter.